Welcome back to the Everyday Disciple podcast, where we discuss what it means to follow in the way of Jesus in everything, everywhere, every day. This month, we're going to be talking around what does it mean to be good stewards of our time, our talent, and our treasures. My name is Andrew. I'm one of the pastors here at Crossroads Church, and I am joined by my co-host, Ruth, who's with us. You've seen her before, and a returning guest as well to the Everyday Disciples podcast, our own executive pastor, Joel Winger. We usually begin these conversations with, hey, what's something interesting that people don't know about you? And so since we've already found out your interesting fun facts, we know about your toes, yep. Joel, I thought, let's ask something different. What is something that the Lord is currently teaching you?
That's a good question. As I've been thinking through this, and just one of the things that I kind of came to mind this morning was, that my relationship with Christ is fluid. Mm-hmm. And, it's one of those that you have relationships with family or friends or whatever. And over the years, that relationship changes and shifts. As I've been thinking through, Lord, how do I change my relationship and the way I'm interacting with you as I grow older and have more life experience and things like that. And I've had to change some of those practices in my life to deepen that relationship. So that's kind of the last few months is just, figuring out new ways to engage with the Lord and giving up old habits and old ways of connecting with Him to find new. And there's been life from those, practices and changes in my day to day. So that's mine.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's cool. What God is teaching me a lot of patience and just trusting Him with the process and in waiting for different things, and that my perspective is not His perspective, and trying to walk willing to be shaped by His perspective and reframing what it is that I see and how I think, both about myself, about the world, about Him. Mm-hmm. And it takes a lot of patience, and it's definitely very frustrating. It's a frustrating season for sure, but I know that I can feel the growth happening in it, even though it's not, a lot of the times it's not what you sign up for. And then you realize, oh, I guess I'm growing in these ways. That's not what I expected. I think those are the things that I'm thinking through and feeling at the moment. Yeah. So you have to share, Andrew.
Yeah,
I have to share.
You do.
Well, part of this is what I love in this conversation is, as everyday disciples, right? We're constantly learning, we're constantly growing. And so there is a dynamic to our relationship with the Lord. And so that's part of what I love about this is, hey, we do have this fluidity, this movement. I think in this season, right now, one of the scriptures that comes to mind just as I'm thinking about it is, abhor what is evil and cling to what is good. And so I just think there's an evil before us right now that I noticed that someone thought would sneak past me, and I'm just going to call it out.
I tried so hard.
This is an evil. This is a place of goodness. And so, where normally a bear's helmet is, it's been desecrated. And like Phineas, I want to be zealous for goodness. And so I'm just gonna throw this in the trash. Is what I'm gonna do. It was a good try. Mm-hmm. It was a good attempt.
And for those who are just listening, what was that? What was that on your shelf?
That was a Green Bay Packers helmet.
There we go.
Joel had snuck on.
Mm-hmm.
Joel and I agree on many things in life. Our choice of football team is not one of them, and so the Chicago Bears are my favorite. And yes, it is. I've lost many lunches to Joel over the years because my team has not shown up as well as his team. I'll just leave it there. But no, I think to be serious, what's God showing me in this season. He really has shown me His faithfulness and the ways in which there's a steady, a steadiness and a growth to the Lord when you follow kind of the long obedience in the same direction. There's not always these moments, these big moments where you're like, you answered this prayer, but you start to see God moving and shaping and showing up in ways that are so profound, and yet they feel small, but they're significant. And I think I've been seeing more of those moments, more prayers that have been answered in ways that were unexpected, and just really enjoying the way that God is kind. I don't have a better way of putting that. And not only in my own life, but what I get to see and witness in the lives of others, where he just meets people where they're at, and doesn't leave them there. He continues to grow them. And so I think getting to witness that in my own life and the life of others has been pretty amazing in this last stretch. So not easy, but amazing. So, yeah. So,
That's
Cool.
thanks for asking. So, well, as a reminder, why do we have these conversations, and why are we doing this? At Crossroads, one of our values is that we are everyday disciples. And that means our relationship with God is intended to shape every part of our lives, that there's no separation between the mundane and the spiritual. Our life with God isn't confined to just a Sunday morning. It's to be lived in every moment and every setting. And so what we've set out to do in this first season, over the course of kind of 8 episodes, we're laying out different practices. And today, the practice that we're talking around is stewardship. And specifically, how do we steward our time, our talent, and our treasure? And so to begin this conversation, just kind of throwing this out to you guys, when you think about stewardship, and particularly stewardship in the church, what comes to mind? What are the first things that you think of? And that can be good and bad, as often happens in this conversation. So.
Totally, yeah. I'll dive right in. And I mean, stewardship, I think money. I mean, that's just kind of the go-to, and it may be a little bit Christianese, if you will, of just growing up and being involved in church for so long. And it may be part of my role here at Crossroads. If, the executive role is helping to oversee the financials and the facilities and those type things. So that's where my mind triggers to, like, initially, is just, finances and money. And, money can be sensitive within the church. And so that can be a good thing if it's talked about well. But that's initially where I go to. So.
Yeah, me too. It was definitely immediately money and how much are you giving? I go to the negatives of the sermons that are very you should be giving money and those types of things, but also the negative of, if you're not using your talents and your giftings, like, you're not serving the Lord. Like those it's more of the pushy or the guilt trip or the shaming conversations around stewardship of, like, you're not doing it right. So I think those are the immediate things that come to my mind. Unfortunately, I hate that, but the critical side of it.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's easy for that to become where we kind of focus in on, because those are often kind of the loudest stories. They're not always the most common, honestly, but the negative stories usually get more press, and we see abuse of power. We see abuse of finances within church. We see people do things that we're like, what, can we trust that conversation in the church well? Or there's a lot of shame involved in it. And for me, whenever this conversation comes up, I typically run to, that Matthew 6:21 passage, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And it's such a reminder that so often we think, well, our heart's desires will shape us. But what Jesus is reminding us is actually what you treasure is shaping your heart for good or bad. And particularly in this conversation that can often be so negative in the church world and in our faith walk, I think flipping that, and I think Jesus was doing a lot of that, but really there's an invitation to be good stewards, and there's a joy to being good stewards that we don't often see, because we hear all the negative noise to it. And I think that's part of what I hope in this conversation, that we can start to see some freedom in that. and less of the, well, you know what you should be doing, and here's how much, and have you given this, but instead flip that to, here's the opportunity you have to join in what God's doing in the kingdom with the time, the talent, and the treasures that you've been given. And so, I'm excited for this conversation because I think it's a really necessary one. And so when we think of stewardship, let's define that a little bit. And so I'm going to give you a definition that I've found helpful. And this is from Ben Patterson. He says, a steward is someone entrusted with another's wealth or property and charged with the responsibility of managing it in the owner's best interest. So I'm going to read it again and then just react to that for me a little bit. If you've got thoughts on that or questions. Or a steward is someone entrusted with another's wealth or property and charged with the responsibility of managing it in the owner's best interest. What do you think?
You want to go first?
No, I'll let you do
Okay.
it.
So gentlemanly.
Absolutely.
So kind.
Joel's like, I don't have anything yet. Do you want to go first?
Yeah.
No, it's, the steward aspect of it, and it makes you kind of think back to old times of when they're a steward, of a job, a role. And, I think, towards the end of that quote, managing it in the owner's best interest. So the steward is managing the finances, the property, whatever it may be, but it's in the interest of somebody else. So it's not something of his own that he's managing, but it's somebody else's wealth or things that he's managing. And so you're doing so in a way that's in the benefit of somebody else, which, in this conversation, I think is going to be very, revealing of whose, money. Is it ours? Is it God's? What are we doing with that? So I like this definition because it gives a clarity, I think, that, opens up the door of who we're doing it for, and that's a huge aspect when it comes to the church and stewardship. So,
Yeah, it's exactly of revealing where your heart's at and who is the master of every situation. I don't really have a whole lot of thoughts on it personally. No, I just think that there's the responsibility aspect of it. That we aren't our own, and there's responsibility when it comes to following Jesus. And we're going to get into that more, but just it's easy to follow the Lord conceptually, but when you do it, it becomes difficult because there's responsibility to it. And I think of people who are first Christians. You're excited, you're doing this thing, you've met Jesus, but then you start to learn there's responsibility. There's things in my life that need to change. There's things that I need to do differently. There's ways that I need to worship the Lord in specific ways, and choices that go into that. And the responsibility aspect of it is the one that keeps playing in my mind of, okay, I'm responsible for something, so I want to do it well. So,
No, and I think that last piece is something comes up a lot in conversations of there's almost this pressure. I want to do this right with what I've been given. I want to do this right. I don't want to screw this up. And then there's also just the competition for our heart too, where I've been given these things. And I want to steward them in the owner's best interest and God's best interest. But I have interests too, and I have needs too, right? And that can begin to take this hold on our heart, whether that's motivated by fear, whether that's motivated by greed, whether that's motivated by just simply our own wants and desires, right? That we can allow our treasure to become what shapes us. And so to kind of flesh this out a little bit, I want to read a passage of scripture that I think is helpful for us, and it's the parable of the talents. And so this is in Matthew 25, beginning in verse 14. And so I'm gonna read this whole parable, and then we'll kind of pick some things apart. But it says, "For it will be like a man going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. And he who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had made the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here, I have made 5 talents more. And his master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little, I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also, who had the 2 talents, came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here, I have made 2 talents more. And his master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also, who had received the 1 talent, came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you do not sow and gathering where you scatter no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I scatter no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has the 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away, and cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness, in the place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. I mean, a really positive ending there. Super inspiring and encouraging.
So encouraging.
But there's some important things to unpack here. And so as we're reading through that, what are things that you kind of notice right off the bat? What stands out?
You know, I one thing that stood out early on in the passage is that the master's giving to his servants according to their ability. So the master's seeing there's different levels of, you know, ability and responsibility, and he's giving to those different people differently. So I just caught it as you read it. I've read this passage multiple times before, and as you read through that, it stuck out of, okay, the master sees that there's different abilities, and that's okay. You know, but it then goes into, you know, how that was managed, which is significant.
But I love within that observation, right? You can trail down something and where you start to go, well, was that fair that some got more and some got less? Right, which can become distracting for us in our stewardship. We're like, if you had trusted me with the 5, Lord, I tell you, I could do a lot, but you only gave me 1. Why did you only give me 1? Right, where there's this sense of what could be entitlement, right? And so when we read that, right, we don't hear that conversation. That's not what's coming up in the midst of this. But sometimes in our own modern kind of thinking, we're like, where's the fairness in that? Why is it different? But anything else that you notice in that passage?
I think that the thing that the good and faithful servant part is just, that's always the hope that that's what you end up being told, not the very unfortunate ending. Which, on your note of the pressure, right, that you were saying before reading this passage, was just getting me thinking of perfectionism. Like, I know I like to call myself a recovering perfectionist, but the Lord is revealing I don't think I'm actually in recovery yet. So just that constant need of needing to have something done perfectly. And like the idea of Christian perfectionism, that we do everything as perfect as possible. And there is a little added pressure. It's like, am I going to be the servant that's told good and you were good and faithful, or am I going to be afraid and not do things? But then it's like, well, what type of fear are they talking about? Is it so we can dive into that further, but the pressure of that, but also, okay, if I am doing the best with what I am entrusted with, and I'm doing it for the Lord, like, theoretically, we should have the well done, good and faithful servant at the end of it, right? But how do we do that without it being the pressure, without it being the perfection that's in that? Well,
and even there's the well done, but it's also enter into the joy of your master, right? And so there's there's a piece where when we're talking around pressure, that's not joyful, right? That doesn't feel free. But when we've done something well, there's a joy that's shared within that. And I love that that's the invitation here, and somewhat the expectation, like I'm giving this to you to use and to multiply, which again, we can talk around that pressure piece of it, but there's also a joy to that. Like, hey, I've given this to you because I trust you, and I want you to steward this. I want you to have this opportunity. And sometimes I think we can go, well, am I worthy of this opportunity? Am I going to mess up this opportunity? Can I use what I've been given well? And so I love that there's joy in this, even though the ending, right, is not very joyful. There's some harshness to it, right?
Yeah, gnashing of teeth,
right,
man.
right.
Yeah.
And why? What was the motivator for the servant who was given the one talent to hide it?
Yeah.
Right. What was motivating him? Fear. Right. I was afraid of you. I knew you to be a harsh man. Like, what's his understanding of the master? He's harsh. He's expecting me to draw this firm line, and if I screw this up, I'm in so much trouble. So I'm just going to hide this. And what do we see? The very thing you're afraid of, you're now experiencing because it was given to you to use, not to hide, not to squelch or to hoard or to hang on to, but to use. And so for me, when I read this passage, why are we talking about this passage when it comes to stewardship? Because we have a good and faithful king who's entrusted each of us with time, talent, and treasure that he's given us to use for the joy of our king, right? And for the joy of ourselves when we steward that well, to use it, not to hide it or to hoard it. And I love that the expectation is you've been given this to enjoy, right? To steward well. I mean, that could take us we could go all the way back to Genesis and the original kind of mandate of what God set forth, the beauty of creation. And I want you to rule and have dominion over this. I want you to care for this, right? We were entrusted as stewards even then. Our sin and our rebellion has caused us to now compete. Instead of living for our master's desires, we're living for our own desires, and we're trying to put those things to death. But I believe stewardship isn't just, again, we already talked around, sometimes we limit that to our money, our treasure. But it's our time. It's how we use our time and our talents. And sometimes using that word talent of like your gifts and abilities, people are like, I don't really have a talent. Like I can't sing, I can't dance, that sort of a thing. But we've all been given gifts and abilities. And if you're a follower of Jesus, and we're going to look at this, if you're a follower of Jesus and the Holy Spirit resides in you, you are now a temple of God wherever you go. You've been given a gift, at least one, and we'll talk around that. But we've been given these things to steward for the interest of our master, right? Again, for the glory of God and for the good of others. Now, like as we talk around some of this, and we pull those apart, and we're going to look at time, talent, and treasure. When you guys think of this, what's kind of the hardest area of stewardship for you, and maybe currently?
Before we jump there, I have a question for you on just that passage and just the idea as a whole. Do you think that it's better to fail trying to use those talents, treasures? What's God's perspective? Is he okay with failure, even though you're trying, but then you're resubmitting to him, or to hide that treasure, and not use it?
No, that's a great question. And I think for me, when I look at this passage, what seems to be the point that Jesus is even pushing us into is use what you have been given. Don't shrink back from it. And again, sometimes our motivation for shrinking back can be fear of failure. And I think in that regard, I would rather fail trying than not trying. And I think even as we step out in those moments, that's going to expand our faith. I think God meets us in those moments of our fear of when we say, I'm going to obey you, even though I'm terrified. That's a moment and opportunity to obey, not ourselves, but our King. Say, okay, you've given me this. I'm going to step forward with this. And so I would encourage those who have that fear of, I'm going to mess this up. How did you step into life with Jesus to begin with? Was it because he said, you've met all my standards, and so now you can follow me? Or were you met by his grace and that changed everything for you? And so sometimes we start in God's grace and recognize his mercy, and then we turn it into trying to earn it. And I think this is an area where often we try to earn it by doing it all perfectly. And when we do that, that fear of failing, right? We're not the perfect one, but we know the perfect one. We're not going to experience perfection in our action this side of heaven. There's sanctification, and we're growing in that. But I think for us, with what we've been given, how do we step in and lean in, even when it feels risky, even when it feels scary? I think that's an act of obedience and faith in the Lord. And I would rather fail trusting him than hiding what I have from him. So, and the last thing, because I think sometimes too, we can have a humble pride where the gifts and abilities we've been given, we're afraid to use because am I thinking I'm something I'm not? Or am I overestimating my abilities? Is that really for me to do? If God's given you that gift, he's given that for you to not only glorify him, but for those who are around you in your community. And so don't hoard that, don't hide that, and don't allow your own kind of false pride of like, well, I don't want to be too big. No, look a fool for Christ. Like let's do that, and let's fail that way. I think is a better way.
I just thinking, God, wants our best, even our excellence, but the perfection side is like you said, not on this side. The perfection will come, in heaven, and so I agree with you. That we're trying and we're working through those steps of how do we work towards the Lord and using the giftings that he's given us, but not be hindered by fear of failure. It's sometimes okay to fail and get back up and do it again. So yeah.
And your point of that you're doing it but trusting God along the way, and in this story from Matthew, it's the perception of the master that informed the decisions. So if we aren't seeing God as being trustworthy, if we aren't seeing him as being good or faithful, we're not going to do the thing that is in front of us, right? And obviously we're all growing in that. We don't just immediately be like, oh yeah, I trust God as all these things.
Totally.
Like there's seasons that's not how it feels. But the perception, where your heart is, that's where you treasure. How you see the Lord is how you act out on what you're doing, and which is the garden, right? They sinned, and then they had a different perception of God after that, and they hid. Right. Where we do things, whether we sin or we're scared to do the thing that God puts in front of us, we manufacture a new perception of God to stop us from moving forward.
No, and I think it's so important to get back to the truth of who God is and to remember what he invites us into, even in this conversation. I know we know this verse, so many people hear it all the time, but Ephesians 2:8-10 says, "For by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not your own doing. It's the gift of God, not as a result of works, so that no one may boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them." And so there's just this idea of God has rescued us, he's redeemed us, not that we would shrink back from his calling, but that we'd actually lean in. There'd be a freedom to chase after him with all of who we are. But within that, stewarding our time, our talent, our treasure, where do you find the wrestle? Maybe in the season of life you're in right now, where do you feel that?
Yeah, for sure. For me, 100% is time. It's one of those that it's just, I'm in the busyness of young kids and sports and school and church and work and just all those things. And so time for me is definitely the area that I would say that's the hard one. That's one that I have to focus on more. That's the one that I have to be paying attention to where I'm saying yes, where I'm saying no, and just making sure that I'm being wise with being intentional with, where my time's being spent, so that I'm pouring into my kids well, and I'm pouring into my wife in that relationship well. I'm present and working, here throughout the week, and then Sundays. It's just, so time just is one that we only have 24 hours a day. There's no way to get more. Right. And so, how do I manage that and be intentional surrounding that?
Yeah, mine is also time, but specifically in how am I taking time to rest and actually care for myself so that I can show up and do the other things? Because I will just keep going and going and going, and then I break. Yep. Not literally, but I'm really bad at scheduling time that's actually restful, not just, zoning out and watching a movie, being on my phone, whatever it is, but actually something that will fill my mind and my soul so that I can show up well in ministry, I can show up well at work, I can show up for my friends, my family, and all those things. So time in making sure I am able to show up is, I'm not very good at that.
You're not alone. I mean, I think all three of us, I would say the same thing. Time seems to be the significant factor for me, and particularly with different responsibilities, different things that are pulling in all different directions. It's easy to kind of justify, well, Lord, hey, just be with me today. And we're going to go get some work done. But am I pausing and stopping and listening? Okay, Lord, I have my to-do list, but is this your to-do list? Mm-hmm. Is this what you have for me today? And so that discipline is really hard, but it's helpful to reshape my time, to prioritize the right things. And I wish I was perfect at that, but I'm saying that's my hardest area because I wrestle with that. Mm-hmm. But we need to get this done. And it's like, actually, no, you're not going to show up well to that unless you're spending time with me, or you're preparing for those things. And so paying attention to that, I think, is huge. But I know everybody has some different things within that too. And whether that's their gifting or their ability where they've been reluctant to step in and serve, or it's the money thing that has this hold on us, and there's this fear of, but if I let go of what I have, I'm not going to have enough. And so how do we navigate that? So for the last part of this conversation, I just want to kind of briefly go through those three segments. Time, we'll look at time, talents, and then our treasure. And just to kind of frame up some things, a couple of scriptures, Ephesians 5:15-16 says, "Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time, because the days are evil." And then James 4:14, "Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes." So with those kind of as our thoughts, particularly that first verse of looking carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of your time. What are ways that we can best steward our time, right? We're all kind of self-admitted. This is an area we're growing in, so none of us is saying, we've figured this out. But what are things that help you with your time?
Yeah, that's a good and a hard question because it's the internal struggle. I think for me, it's just being very deliberate in my day-to-day of where I'm saying yes, I'll engage in this, and where I'm saying no. Ruth, you mentioned the phone, and that's a huge thing for me, especially when I'm trying to unwind and be just letting down from the day, and it's saying no to that silly device that is meaningless, and then you're able to engage elsewhere, be it in relationships, be it with quiet time with the Lord, but the phone for me is one of those struggles that I just have to be very cognizant of. Like I can't just be on this all the time. So how are ways for me, it's just the daily reminders of being just paying attention to my schedule and knowing, where I need to pull back a little bit and where I need to push in. Just prioritizing, for me right now, family, and prioritizing that time, just pouring into the kids, and then creating the time and space where then I can engage fully in ministry and be a healthy balance between those things, of not just leaving and the wife and kids at home and jumping into ministry because it's ministry, but there needs to be a healthy balance between life, and ministry. So, those are raw thoughts and emotions right now. Just there's real conflicts of figuring out like where's the healthy balance in those relationships and then pouring in and discipling others and finding those opportunities to be obedient to the Lord. And I think of our friend Jeff Roberts. And for those of you that don't know Jeff Roberts, he is extremely good at listening to the Lord. And he does not have a set schedule. He does not have a plan most of the time. But I've seen him engage with people in these beautiful ways and just sharing the love of Christ because he's willing to just be like, I'm going to turn left right now and just walk up the street and engage with somebody that I run into. And there's just beautiful stories of, when time is not hyperly focused like mine is a lot of the times, the Lord creates these opportunities to have these engaging conversations and building relationships that is really just beautiful. But it's just, for me, listening and where is the Spirit pulling and tugging and saying, this is where you need to adjust and this is where you need to change your plan, for the day. Time. It's hard.
It is. It is.
I think for me in managing my time is that I make sure I spend it with other people because I know that I'm very prone to isolate, but then it makes things worse and I'm not actually resting and doing the things I need to do, but I'll just isolate and pull away from people. But if we're going with the unwise versus wise situation, like I know that it's wise to spend time in community and it's to spend time with people who will build me up and remind me of the things that the Lord is doing. And also then we always feel better when we get to pour into someone else instead of dealing with our own stuff. And then you end up feeling better because someone cares about you when you're with a friend or whatever that is. But in managing my time, the thing that I find really helpful is making sure I am scheduling spaces that I'm with people, whether it's my community group, whether it's just one-on-one, grabbing coffee with someone, grabbing dinner with someone, just really investing in other people with my time is ideal in how I actually can do it in a way that's honoring to the Lord and to myself so that I am stewarding it best. Where do you find things helpful?
Yeah, I think time is one that we can drift in really easily. And we can just kind of find ourselves in repeating patterns, even if they're not good, and we can find ourselves wasting time. I think we can be really selfish with our time. And I know that's something I have to gauge at times of not being like, I just need my time, kind of a thing. And we can kind of schedule out any spaces. Like I love what you said of where are we pouring into others? Where are we using our time? It's one of the most precious gifts we have is time to spend that on others. And sometimes we go into those moments kind of hemming and hawing and like, this is not what I want to do. And then we always leave encouraged because we've got to see God do something and he's stirred within us and he's encouraged within us. And so I think for me, a practice I find helpful is actually like auditing my time where I'll like look back through on a week and go, where did I spend my time? And kind of review that I kind of lost the plot early on in the week, or I let the tyranny of the urgent overtake the things that I needed to do, or were the more important things. And so I think prayerfully kind of scheduling things out, and I like a plan. I like to schedule that out. I like to know my day, but I also know that at any moment that can get disrupted. And so I think even small things of we have this tendency to want to pack out our schedules. And so they're as full as possible. And so, just an example that's a living one for me is I could schedule meetings so that I'm meeting from 11 to 12, and then from 12 to 1, and then from 1 to 2. And what I know is at some point, if I've scheduled my day that way, as I'm getting to the end of that meeting, I'm not paying attention to the person who's in front of me anymore.
Yeah.
I'm already moving on to the next meeting. And then usually if I'm rushing right into another meeting, I'm thinking of what just happened in that first meeting. I haven't processed any of that, right? And so I'm not present to what's going on. You're not actually getting the best of me. So I have to create some margin in my day so that I'm not rushing through people. I have to create some spaces where I can go in prepared and, okay, Lord, I'm meeting with this person. Would you help me? Is there any word you have for them before we meet? Is there something that you want me aware of as we're going in? But I have time to pray through that. And again, that's an ideal. I'm not always there. Sometimes I am running or the meeting went long. But I think when we kind of have this hope of like, I'm going to get better with my time, but we don't kind of write down how we're using our time, we don't really know where it's going and what's happening. And I know a lot of our phones can track the usage of them and what we're doing. And some of us turn that off because we don't want to know how much we're using that, right? But I think those things are helpful to look at and go, okay, Lord, I do want to be better with my time. And so I think taking that, again, there could be a lot of shame there of like, I'm wasting so much time. The exercise of that is going, okay, Lord, I want to use my time for you better. And so would you help me? Where can I give, 1% more this week of my time towards serving someone, more time with you? Just a small tweak. It doesn't have to be like a complete order, but start to just look back and go, okay, Lord, how can I start to step in with you differently? I think being intentional with that is really important because we don't drift into intentionality, right? If you're pulling off the freeway and you see your exit, you hit your blinker, you signal, you shift over so that you can get off. There's some motions that you go through. And the same way with our time, there's some things that we need to think through so that we've got our blinkers on, we're getting off at the right exits at the right time. And so I think it's important how we steward that. And we could talk forever about time, but I think start wherever you are. Start with just, okay, Lord, I want to give 1% more of my week to you, right? 168 hours in a week. I think that's the right number. Someone's doing the math right now and they're like, he can't do math. That's true. I'm not great at it. But we all have that same amount of time. How can I give just a little bit more this week? And whether that's restful in the Lord or whether that's serving, but intentionally giving that time. I think it's a great place to start. And don't let the shame be the motivator. Yeah. Allow the invitation to the joy of the master to be the motivator, right? Start there. Remember, it's by grace you've been saved. You're not trying to earn this. You've been invited into life and abundantly. So let's look at talents. I know we spent more time on that than I expected. And I feel like we could go for a long time today. So let me read a passage from 1 Corinthians. Talents, kind of our gifts or abilities. This is coming from 1 Corinthians 12, 1 through 11. Now, concerning spiritual gifts, brothers, I do not want you to be uninformed. You know that when you were pagans, you were led astray to mute idols, however you were led. Therefore, I want you to understand that no one speaking in the Spirit of God ever says Jesus is accursed, and no one can say Jesus is Lord except in the Holy Spirit. Now, there are varieties of gifts, but the same Spirit, and there are varieties of service, but the same Lord, and there are varieties of activities, but it is the same God who empowers them all in everyone. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. I'm going to read that again. That's verse 7. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. For as to one is given through the Spirit the utterance of wisdom, and to another the utterance of knowledge, according to the same Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit, to another gifts of healing by the one Spirit, to another the working of miracles, to another prophecy, to another ability to distinguish between spirits, to another various kinds of tongues, to another the interpretation of tongues. All these are empowered by one and the same Spirit, who apportions to each one individually as he wills. Okay. There's a lot in there. And obviously I highlighted verse 7, to each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good.
I think there's a whole podcast
Yeah.
probably right in here.
Seriously.
And honestly, I would encourage you, if you're listening to this one, I'd encourage you to go back to our podcast where we talked around walking in step with the Spirit. Because Ryan and I, we talked through this very idea of how do you start to discover your spiritual gifts, and where do you lean in with that? And so as we talk around this, that's what we're highlighting. And each of us has been given a gift. And I love that it says the same Spirit who apportions to each one individually as he wills. That gives some freedom there to what Jesus even spoke of some are going to have 5 talents, some are going to have 2 talents, some are going to have 1 talent. And rather than focusing on what we wish we have, let's develop what we do have, and let's lean into that and use that as a manifestation of the Spirit for what? For the common good, for our brothers and sisters. That's the talents that we've been given, the abilities that we've been given. I will say there are many things I am not gifted at. And there are certain people who are gifted in administration and organization, and I am so grateful for them because what can feel paralyzing to me, right, it takes them 2 seconds because the Lord has just given them to see the ability to do that. Now, I could fight that all day long, and yes, there's some truth to like, let's get better at the things that we're not great at. Or I could lean into their gifts and then take on the things that I know I can do that they go, oh, I could never do what you do. That would spin me out for days. And I'm like, oh, this is just how I'm wired. Like God has just made me to chase after this, and he's empowered me through his Spirit. Like, okay, I'll take that. You take this. Let's partner together for the common good and the glory of God. But when you hear this, what comes to mind for you guys as we're talking through this?
Yeah, no, it definitely, I'm sitting here thinking just that idea of we all function as different parts of this body, and if everybody were a hand, we wouldn't do a whole lot, so we need the giftings of each other to be, successful, as a body of Christ. And just like you have strengths that maybe Ruth and I do not, we have areas that are gonna, strengthen and come around you. So yeah, it's really a neat, beautiful picture of how God designed, the body to function as a whole. And there's edification that happens when everybody is serving in the areas that he has gifted them in. So it's one that, I encourage, if you don't know what your gifting is, like, touch base with us. We'd love to help.
Yeah.
Like it's really a freeing thing to find where some of your giftings are, and some your talents. Outside of spiritual giftings, we have talents that God's given us, and there's ways to be using those within your day-to-day life and within the church, and it really can bring people together when we're functioning in ways that we've been gifted. So yeah, it's there's a hand, a foot, a mouth, and ears and eyes. There's reasons that God has designed it where we have different abilities and gifts.
Yeah. Well, you keep reading through 1 Corinthians 12, and it'll start to walk through the body and how it works together, all under the headship of Christ. And so I'd encourage you to read through that. And what we'll do too is we'll attach on the show notes to this some of the books that we had recommended around the spiritual gifts. And because I know for some people in this conversation, maybe you haven't discovered yet, or you don't have a good idea of what that means for you. And that would be a good place for you to start to go, okay, Lord, I want to steward well what you've given me, the opportunities that you've given me. I think also one of the things that I would encourage people within their talents and within their giftings and their ability is sometimes we have this idea of where we want to be or where we think we should be. And we can forget where God has us right now. And that you are in a particular sphere of people and influence. And yes, he may be growing you into something and he may be preparing you for something else, but don't overlook where you're at right now. Show up well. And I would even encourage you as a starting point, just say, hey, Lord, I I know you have me placed here. I know I have my own ideas of where I'd like to be, but would you help me to see what the opportunities are right now and here in front of me? How do you want me to show up for your glory and for the good of others? And just listen and pay attention. And throughout your day, maybe that's your prayer. Lord, I'm stepping into this. Is there something you want me to see here today? This person, I see them all the time. Is there something you want to say to them? Or is there a way I can encourage them? Would you help me? I think it's important not to look past where we're at. But sorry.
It's like in gifts and talents, there's also, you might see the beginning sprout of it in your life, right? But it's not until later that God's going to make the fruit of it, which is the part of the stewardship of if, okay, you see that little thing, okay, you have the responsibility to like nurture it and take care of it. And because God's going to make fruit from it, but he's walking with you through the entirety of that sprout growing into something more. But I totally resonate with the looking to the future of like, this is where I want to be. And it's like, oh, well, you can't be there yet because it's not the right time. You don't have the knowledge, you don't have the experience, you don't have whatever it is. You can't just immediately become a CEO of a company if you haven't worked like at the desk for a little while, right? But with the talents and the giftings, I just want to say, if someone feels like, oh, I got a lame gift, right? It was like, oh, I don't speak in tongues. Oh, I can't heal people. Okay, maybe you can one day. Maybe the Lord will make that happen, right? But your gift is just as cool as all of them because they're all from the same Spirit, which is really powerful. It's just like administration, faith, same Spirit does healings, provides interpretation of tongues, provides prophecy, same level of power. Just shown differently. They're all cool.
No, that's a good point. That's a really good word and encouragement, because I do think sometimes we go, why did I just get the one?
Yeah.
He got 5. What's that? Instead of going, okay, with this one, how do I use that? Lord, what do you want me to do? And how can I multiply this in the best of ways? I think that's so important for us. Okay, well, let's keep moving, and we're going to hit treasure. Matthew 6:24. No one can serve 2 masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. Pretty clear. And what it's stating here of, again, that whole idea of what we treasure, that's where our heart's going to be. Let's treasure God above money. 2 Corinthians 9:6-7, the point is this: whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. I love that verse because it's speaking to the attitude of a heart, and not just what Jesus really confronted in the Pharisees at times is like, you tithe, your mint, your cumin, like you're giving a tenth of all that stuff, but it's this checklist that you're going down and you're using that as your righteousness, and you've lost the heart behind it. You're to be cheerful in this, that there's a joy, again, a joy of the master in what we are giving to him. Again, I know the money conversation always kicks into people differently, but what are common things people ask about when it comes to giving? Like, what are the common conversations you hear when it comes to money and church and giving? Again, good or bad?
Oftentimes it's like, well, where is this going?
Yeah.
How much of this is going towards salaries? How much of this is going towards missions? How much of this is like, where is it all going? I don't want my pastor showing up in a brand new car or something like that, like the newest model of something. Like, where is it going? Is this being done well in church? And then in personal lives, it's like, well, I only have so much. Do I have to give from here?
And I'll flip that. Like a real thought when we were trying to go and purchase a new car. I had this moment where I was like, is this too nice a car? What level car do I need as a like? I don't want. I want something functional and good and safe for my family, all that sort of stuff. But I don't want it to be showy. And so, like, just to flip that, there's an interesting wrestle that goes the other way. And to me, what that exposed in that moment was, man, money still has this weird hold on my heart, that I'm still like, figuring that out, right? Like, and that's a real thing. I think in different seasons that can flare up in different ways. And so how do we not let that become weird, right? Because it becomes
It's
weird.
hard though, because it's like, you know, in the society that we live, we need money.
Yep.
You know, that's just a necessity in life to survive, to eat, to put a house over, you know, your head. But, you know, a question that I wrote down with this is, does God need our money? And, you know, it's one of those where I don't think he does. You know, he enjoys the aspect of us sacrificially giving, you know, to him, but he doesn't need it. You know, it's not like God works on the same, you know, rules and laws that we do here on earth. You know, he wants the heart side of, you know, why we're giving and why we're, you know, offering that sacrifice, as an act of worship, you know? So it's one that, you know, I think money is this sensitive topic in church because it is personal, and you know, people don't like to be told where to give and what to do with their money. They want to be able to direct where that goes. And then people always have an opinion of, well, here's where the money should be spent, you know, and it becomes this sensitive thing. But I think we have the ability, you know, within church leadership, to have transparency, to have the ability to do it well, with excellence, and to do it in a way that is of the Lord. You know, where we're looking at how are we stewarding this whole thing in a way that is healthy and pleasing to the Lord. So
No, I think within this conversation, it's also taking away some of our fear around it. You know, those questions of where is this going? What you know? I think also there's a tendency to ask a question of like, well, how much? What's the right percentage? You know, and that really comes from what we see in Hebrew scriptures of the tithe, right? We see Abraham gave a tenth of his kind of blessings to Melchizedek, king of Salem, like when he sees him and encounters him. There's no mandate there. There's just this kind of overflow of his giving there. But then we see in the law, law of Moses, that we are told to give a tenth of our crops and our produce and our goods. And some of that goes towards the temple and the Levites, and some of that is just kind of a blessing unto the Lord. And that idea, right, has carried on for a long time. But in the New Testament, we're never given that number. And we see that the law has been fulfilled in its entirety through Jesus. And so people always go, okay, well, what's the number? And sometimes we treat that number as like, okay, what's my minimum requirement here? Can I just get that out of the way? And what we see again is the heart of being a cheerful giver. Like, we want to be generous. And when we look at the New Testament church, it's a generous church. And we see the way in which they share their goods and their things. No numbers given, but there's an expectation of generosity. And I think being generous is one of the best ways we combat the hold money can have on our heart, because we're opening our hands saying, okay, this is not mine. You've given me this. You've blessed me with this. And I think it's important for us to recognize too, you've blessed me with this, whether it's an abundance or it's a little. This is what I have. And I can give of my two mites, right? Like Jesus watching the widow. And I always think that's fascinating that he was like watching what people were giving. And we go,
talk about pressure.
Right. Like that's strange. He's just sitting there watching as people are dropping it in, right? And Jesus had a lot to say about money. He talks around money more than most other things that he talks around, because he knows the hold this can have on our heart. And Paul talks around in 1 Timothy 6:10, that's the love of money. That's the root of all kinds of evil, right? And so when we misplace our love on that, and so how do we begin to be generous again, joyfully? So it's not like, okay, here you can have this, but you're gonna have to pry it out of my cold dead hand, right? Like there's this ability we have, but how do we begin to be people that are generous? And I think there's a lot of ways that we can do that. And I do think, and I'm not just saying this because I work at a church, but I think giving to the church is a simple way of doing that. And I know for us, we take this conversation seriously because we want to be good stewards of what God's given us. And so there's some checks and balances. There's a financial board. There's the elder board. There's things that we go through to ensure, okay, are we using this well for the glory of God and his kingdom? And so giving to church, I'm never going to say, no, that's a bad idea. No, I think it's a good idea. And I think it's a really healthy way of doing that. There's also other organizations that you can give to that are doing good kingdom work. That's a way of giving. And again, when it comes to this idea of giving, I always encourage wherever you're at, okay, like look at where you're at. Same way you kind of audit where you're at with your time, where you're at with your talents. Okay, look at where you're at with your giving. And what would it look like for you, just 1% more? In any one of those directions, intentionally say, Lord, I want to give you more. I think it was John Wesley who said, I want to save all I can so I can give all I can away. And he was one who he had a certain salary that he decided he could live on. And as he began to make more, he just stayed at that salary and everything else just went to giving away to other people, right? And I love that intentionality of this is what I need to survive, right? The rest I'm giving to you. Now, where that becomes hard is when we say, this is what I need to survive, but I think I have this much, it's back here. Like, I don't know if I have enough to survive. So Lord, can I still be generous? And I think there's still ways, even within our lack, to be generous and to allow our open-handedness before the Lord. So I know this is a conversation we could go round and round on, and there's still probably a lot of questions within this. Anything you guys think we need to hit on before we conclude here?
No, it's a good word. You know, I think the beauty in all of these stewardship areas are, you know, the Lord desires the heart posture, you know, more than the physical acts, more than the money, more, you know, than the time, you know, the posture of our hearts and why we're giving of those things is the thing that he's after first and foremost, you know, and the rest are going to multiply and be abundant from there. But I think that is my encouragement is the heart posture, you know, is what, you know, we need to be starting with, and the rest will flow, you know.
Oh. Awesome. That idea too within our giving of a willing sacrifice too. That there are times where it is a sacrifice to give, but it's an offering of worship unto the Lord. So I want to conclude with this verse, Romans 14:7-8. It says, "For none of us lives to himself, and none of us dies to himself. For if we live, we live to the Lord, and if we die, we die to the Lord." Just a reminder that in all areas of our life, we have the opportunity, we've been invited to live for the glory of our good King, who has shown us his mercy and his grace and transformed us. And again, as we follow in the way of Jesus, that's what we're patterning our life after, is his goodness, his grace, and trusting in him, being obedient to him in all areas of our life, including our time, our talent, and our treasures. If you're looking for some practices of, okay, how can we put this into action this month? I think the first question I would have you ask yourself is, what are you holding tight to? As we talked around these different things of time and talent and treasure, what kind of pricked at your heart, or you went, ooh, I don't know if I like that. Ooh, I don't know if I want to be a part of that. And bring your finances, your possessions, your gifting, your time before the Lord, and just ask the Spirit to reveal to you what's an area that has an unhealthy hold on your life, you know, and pay attention to that. And don't give room for the enemy to shame you in that. Say, Lord, I repent. If I've been wasting my resources, my time, my talent, I want to repent to you. I want to seek your forgiveness. He's faithful and just to forgive. And say, now, Lord, empower me to do something different. I want to take a step forward in this. And having that conversation, I think the second thing that's helpful to do is to take an inventory of your time, your talent, and your treasure. Is to know, how am I spending my time? Am I investing the gifts and the abilities that God has given me, or am I hoarding those? And am I giving of my treasure? Am I letting go of some of the resources that God has given me as an act of worship? And again, I would encourage you to kind of look through that and maybe start with one of those areas and say, okay, I'm going to start to give 1% more in this area. And I'm going to practice that as an act of obedience, but also just to shape my heart, because I treasure God most, and that's what I want to shape my heart. And so those are a couple practices I'd encourage anyone listening along to step in. Anything you guys want to add to those?
No, those are good. And, I think the challenge is taking that inventory, and being real with yourself. And, okay, here's where my struggle is. How do I increase that by 1%? And it's more difficult than you think, but there's so much abundance that comes out of that if you're able to actually be true with yourself, step into how do I do this just 1% more. And then maybe the next month it's another couple percent, but the joy that comes when you are focusing on these things and giving more to the Lord is awesome.
No, it's huge.
I think it's also important to stay curious in that space, because when you're looking at what you hold tight to and how you can invest more, in all of these areas, like our family of origin really impacts, right? And when it comes to our money, like how we grew up talking about money affects how we spend our money. Same thing with our time and our talent. So if you're pressing into this and you're thinking, what am I holding tight to? Like, get a little curious about it, because there could be some generational stuff that you got to work through and deal with. And sometimes it's not just as easy as how much, just adding 1%, but it's like, wait, what's holding me back from giving that 1%? And then working through that as well. But then being like, okay, I get it. I have a why now. So let's give this 1%.
I love that. And to be brutally honest in your inventory. Don't shade it, don't shadow it. Sometimes we kind of be like, well, I'm not doing so bad. Just be honest with yourself. You're not showing this to anybody, and just go, okay, Lord, what is that? And Ruth, that's such wisdom of when that kind of pricks up, and you go, gosh, why do I have such resistance there? Lord, what's this wall that's been built up? And to recognize, you're right, the way we approach money has so much to do with family of origin, has so much to do with how we were raised in different ways. And sometimes that's really healthy, and sometimes that can be incredibly unhealthy. And so paying attention to those things is so good. There is joy on the other side of this. I really do believe that. And the invitation isn't to shame you into giving, but it's to steward what God has given you. And so as we close today, I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you guys for joining in. This is a fun conversation. This is really good. And I'm really glad we were able to get that helmet out of here as fast as we could. But thanks for joining us.
It'll come back.
All sin has a way of trying to creep back into our life. Anyway, so appreciate you joining us each month. May you steward your life to the glory of God and the good of others. We will see you next month as we follow in the way of Jesus together. We're going to be talking around the importance next time of sharing our stories and what that looks like. How do we share the good news? And until then, may God bless you, and may you know His grace, may it overwhelm you in all things, and may you experience His peace, which transforms everything. See you next time.